The first item is a closed session. I will entertain a motion to go into that closed session.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the first thing is approval of the agenda.
Okay, that's right.
I should make a motion to approve this morning's agenda.
You got a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve this morning's agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now, the first item is the closed session, and I will entertain a motion on that.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we go into closed session as per roll call vote pursuant NMSA 1978, section 1015(1)H7. The following will be discussed in closed session, pending litigation, specifically the State of New Mexico, County of Santa Fe, First Judicial District, case number D-101-CV-2020-00328. State of New Mexico, no, I'll just leave it at that. It's very long.
We got a second?
Second with discussion, Mayor.
What is it?
I would like to know, are you planning on going into that closed session with us?
I believe I am.
I would ask you to not, and to let the Mayor Pro Tem act on your behalf for the rest of the meeting.
Mr. Rael, can you shed some light on that?
I don't think, Mr. Mayor, that there's anything prohibiting you from participating in the closed session. There's going to be some discussion about the allegations that are made against you and the members of your family. But since there's just going to be discussion and deliberation, I don't think you're expressly prohibited from participating in the closed session. You can, of course, decide not to. It's up to you.
I think I will go to it.
I have a question for Mr. Rael.
Go ahead.
Mr. Rael, do you remember previously when Councilor Ring had a suit pending against the town and we went into closed session to discuss how to proceed with that, and he was denied from going into that meeting? Can you share some light on the difference?
Yes, Counselor, I remember that Counselor Ring had sued the town, and because he was a named plaintiff in the suit against the town of Edgewood, we were discussing, the purpose of that town meeting, of that closed session, was to discuss our legal strategy against Counselor Ring, and so then he was prohibited from participating. Should the council vote after today's closed session to proceed as the plaintiff in this lawsuit against Mayor Bassett, at that point, then that same conflict would arise and he would be prohibited from participating in closed sessions from that point forward. But the purpose of today's closed session is limited solely to making a determination if the town council, the town of Edgewood is going to proceed as the plaintiff, and until that decision is made, then that conflict has not arisen yet, in my opinion. Whereas in the one with Councilor Ring, he had already filed a lawsuit against the town, and so there was already the adverse position between the two. Should you decide today to become plaintiff in this lawsuit, then there would be an adverse position between the town and Mayor Bassett.
It does not matter that he's the defendant in this. I mean, that he is part of this suit.
Councilor, the town of Edgewood is named as both a plaintiff and a defendant in the lawsuit, and the mayor is named as a defendant. The town did not file the lawsuit. This was filed, I'll explain all this in the closed session, but it was filed as a key town lawsuit on behalf of a citizen against the town, asking the town to become the plaintiff in the lawsuit. So should you decide to do that today, there will be an adverse to the mayor. If you decide not to do that today, then the conflict isn't there. But the conflict has not arisen until after that determination is made today.
Okay, I have another question then.
Sure.
Is the mayor going to be allowed to vote to break the tie if there is one?
I think the answer to that question is yes. He could vote to break a tie if there is one. As to solely as to the issue as to whether or not the town of Edgewood is going to become plaintiff in the lawsuit. Because I don't think he's conflicted from doing that in that issue. There's a whole bunch of issues that I'll explain all in the closed session, and we can make all those determinations once you have all that information in front of you.
Okay.
It's a really messy situation because of the way the lawsuit was filed. And once again, it wasn't filed by the town, it was filed by some citizens. So.
Counselor?
Yes, so, Mr. Rail, I also have a question in relation to that. Since the mayor is a defendant, isn't it a conflict of interest, even under the Governmental Conduct Act, for this scenario, for him to even be participating in the discussions, much less making a decision about a lawsuit of determining the town, essentially being the plaintiff against him? Why would he be able to make a decision like that?
Council, we're not going to be discussing any legal strategy today. We're not going to be discussing how the town should proceed. The purpose of this executive session is a very limited purpose, just to determine whether or not we are going to intervene in the case. The statute, the KETAM statute, first asked the State Attorney General's office if they wanted to intervene in the lawsuit on behalf of the citizens of the town of Edgewood against the town itself, the mayor, and the other named plaintiffs, named defendants, I apologize. They decided not to intervene in the case, and now the statute, now the determination has to be made whether or not the town of Edgewood wants to intervene in the lawsuit. That's all we're going to be discussing today. We're not going to be discussing
Right. But, I mean, I could see with KETAM if this was perhaps a citizen trying to recover money from a vendor, like maybe an outside vendor that had defrauded the town or something, and then independently town council would make the decision, perhaps including the mayor, as to whether to proceed as the plaintiff against that outside vendor or not. However, this is concerning himself, so it's a very big conflict. It's not like it's a normal KETAM, if there is such a thing as normal, but you know what I'm saying. It's not a vendor or somebody outside of the town. It's a decision that personally impacts him and his family.
Right. I can only give you the advice that, the way I read it, I think depending on what this town, the governing body decides today, a conflict could arise between the town and the mayor. But until we make that decision at during today's meeting, I don't think there's a conflict yet. And I stand for further questions on it. It's just a really convoluted, messy situation. It's not of the town's doing. This was brought by individuals outside of the town governing body. But the town governing body as a whole has to make this decision, and then a conflict could arise depending on what the decision of the governing body is following this closed session. And we're not going to be discussing strategy. We're not going to be discussing the, how to move forward should we choose to do it. We're simply discussing whether or not we want to intervene in the lawsuit on behalf of the KETAM plaintiff.
You've got a motion on the floor. You got a second?
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry. Councilor, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add a comment to this discussion that pursuant to our own Town of Edgewood Resolution number 2020-12, there's a prohibition of having any recording devices in a closed session. So I just wanted to remind us all.
That is correct. One of the things we can do, Mr. Mayor, is if any member of the governing body feels that there is a conflict, wants to make a motion to vote on prohibiting you from participating in the closed session because they feel like there is a conflict that can also be done as well, if that's something that, Counselor, that you wanted to do. You can make that motion.
I so make that motion to prohibit the mayor from participating in the closed session or the decision-making process as we move forward with this.
Okay. And then Mayor, we'd have to see if there's a second.
Is there a second?
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded to ask Mayor Bassett to recuse from this closed session.
And Mayor, because of the nature of this motion, I would say you're conflicted from voting on this motion.
Okay.
And so now we'll see how the governing body determines.
Do a roll call vote.
First, we have a motion and a second.
All right.
Okay.
I would like to make an amendment to that, to also have the mayor pro tem continue as the head of this meeting if we vote to do that.
I agree.
Do you second the amendment, Counselor?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All right. So then a roll call vote, Mr. Mayor.
Roll call vote, start over here. Counselor Abraham,
Aye.
Counselor Jaramillo,
Aye.
Counselor Abrams,
Nay.
Counselor Holly.
Nay.
We have a tie vote. Motion dies for lack of a majority. Okay, so we've got a motion then on the floor. Do we have a second to it? To go into closed session?
Mayor, Council, Councilor Abraham seconded with discussion.
Okay. So we've got a motion and a second, so we'll do a roll call vote on this. Counselor Abrams,
Aye.
Counselor Abraham,
Nay.
Counselor Jaramillo,
Nay.
Counselor Holly.
Aye.
We have a tie on that, and I vote on that one.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor votes aye. Go into closed session.
Unmuted.
Hang on. We're getting there, almost.
Okay, just wait for Mr. Rao. Go ahead, Leon. Everybody back? Okay, coming out of closed session, I will entertain a motion to go back into open session.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to go back into open session as pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H7. Only the following was discussed in closed session pending litigation. Specifically, the First Judicial District case number D101CV 2020-00328.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to come back into open session from the closed session and under NMSA 1978, sections 10-15-1H7. Only the following was discussed in closed session pending litigation, specifically state of New Mexico County of Santa Fe, First Judicial District, case number D-101-CV-2020-00328. We'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Abrams?
Aye.
Counselor Holly?
Aye.
Counselor Abraham?
Aye.
Counselor Jaramillo?
Aye.
Okay, we're back in open session, and do we have the disclaimer about what was discussed? Why don't you go ahead?
I certify that that was all that was discussed in closed session and that no decisions were made.
Thank you. Counselor Holly?
I so affirm.
Counselor Abraham?
I so affirm.
Counselor Jaramillo?
I affirm that that's all that was discussed, and I have no conflicts of interest.
And as for mayor, I so affirm that that was all that was discussed. Next item is an action item, discussion, consideration, and action on whether or not the town of Edgewood should intervene in this matter as a plaintiff and proceed with the action. So councilors, you've heard what the legal team has told us. And I guess entertain a motion one way or the other to.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, the motion would be a motion to intervene in the Keatam lawsuit brought by Mr. Powers and Mr. McGill and Mr. Calkins against, solely to intervene in count 6, which is a fraud against Taxpayers Act claim against Mayor Bassett individually, and in his official capacity, as well as against Josephine Bassett.
Or not to.
Or not, yeah, so the motion would be made and then you would vote yes or no. Or you can, yeah, you could move not to, whichever you prefer.
Okay.
Although I think it'd be,
Entertain a motion.
I think it may be cleaner to make a motion to intervene and then vote yes or no to
Ended
intervene.
in the affirmative.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that the town of Edgewood intervene in the action, the Keatam suit against the mayor,
As well as Miss Josephine Bassett.
as well as Ms. Josephine Bassett.
Got a motion, do we got a second? Motion dies for lack of a second.
And that's all we have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your time. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, just please excuse me one sec.
Mr. Mayor,
Are we,
I would make a motion to adjourn.
Before you do that, may I speak with council?
Excuse me real quickly.
Okay.
Thank you.
we have a motion to adjourn, we have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.
Right, we need to shred these.